Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Going to get into the orbs today. We're going to get Joe Biden's explanation of the drones because he's just gone. Like, I think they've just given up on his medication and they're just letting him go. We'll show that Joy Behar faking an orgasm. Like, weird. It's going to be a weird day. Something with Blake Lively, who I don't think I've ever covered before. I've talked about how annoying Ryan Reynolds is. But I want to start off with some comments, and there's something else I had to say, which I can't remember what it is, like right now. Oh, all right. Okay, I have this thing where I have a bunch of tabs open with folders on them, and I X'd out of it, which sucks. I gotta go redo that, and I'll get back to this thing here. It only took me about 30 seconds to reopen a few tabs, but it seems like a big deal. It's small things. Luigi, you silly goose, you don't bring crime to do the list to Mickey D's. That's actually kind of a funny title. All right, so apparently in this video I talked about how age difference and cultural differences are really difficult in a marriage. And I see that more than more now that I'm watching stuff on Netflix from foreign countries. You can see just the mannerisms and the way that their content, stories make up. Well, let me read this person's comment and then I'll talk about that. Boy, you're not wrong. My partner and I have a generation gap. We come from different cultures, continents, and upbringings. The first 12 years were absolutely brutal. We were constantly misunderstanding each other and doing things that were incredibly rude in the other's culture. We really need to love each other like mad to overcome the differences. We need to break up many times. We tried to break up many times, but fate always seemed to intervene. When the universe really wants you to be with someone, you will. Um, yeah, whatever. Good luck with that. Well, let me complete my thought. I wanted to say something else, but let me complete my thought about what I was saying about. Well, let me tackle the cultures. I was saying about different cultures. People have a complete different lens that you see the world from. When I went to India the first time, there were a lot of European people there. And there were some comments about my Americanism, about America. You could tell there's an attitude there about America. Not so much from the European, not so much from the Russians and in the Sajmark system, there's people who do the meditation from all over the world. So I met people from like all kinds of different places, right? Countries I've never heard of. I met people from. And I mean, probably, 50 people, right? I remember I first brought my son there. Brought my family there. And my youngest child was like, the first time we went there, he was like the star of the ashram. We went there as a American gathering in Chennai, India, but there was all these other people there from different countries. And I saw him like he was like two of them. Like I would see him all over the ashram hanging out with these different people. He had like Russian friends, adult people that would come up to me and go, "Oh, he has a lot of good, interesting comments and points." He was talking to me one day. He's like, "Yeah, my Chinese friends, like stuff like that. Like people literally from China, like they were there, So, but there's this multicultural aspect to it. And when you meet people from these different cultures, or you go to other countries, or you see, movies and TV shows, our stories make up our internal world, and our stories now are movies and TV shows. It's how you create an internal, understanding, a map of the world, like a historical map and a social map, and like it's just these movies. People are just different. The foreign movies, the way that they think about life, the way that they, I talked about how, in India there's a board game called Head of the Class, where kids were all trying to be head of the class. They all try to be the best student, and they were all, it's like for younger kids, they have such an attitude towards school there because it's so competitive academically that like American kids are just like, oh, I got to go to freaking school, this thing, right? And it's completely different there. And so the way that you perceive, like there's things that offend people. Like we were told not to point our feet at people, like in India. Don't put the bottom of your soles at people. because that's offensive. Because like you're saying that the person's dirt to walk on or something. But I notice like lots of times Indians, if they're pointing to something, we use the middle finger, to point something, right? Like 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 on like if there's a slideshow or something, they'd point like with their middle finger instead of their index finger. And so like there's just these things that people don't know are offensive in other cultures, like this person said in the comment. But I had people in India and say to me, "Oh, you're so American," like just they could see my attitude was different and whatever it was, pompous or and part of it was just me being arrogant or what I do or whatever who I am and the way I express myself, especially back then, which was I was less sensitive to such things, and so it's hard to form a relationship when you don't perceive events the same way, you don't interpret events the same way, and just anything that's about these different cultures. But you can say same thing about America. Like it's also regionally. When you go outside your region, whatever state you grew up. Of course, now you think about the political differences people have, even in their own, even in their own families. But when you go to you marry somebody from the opposite side of the country, and people are quite different there. The dialect is different, and their cultures, and there's just a difference there in terms of everything. Like you grow up in the South as opposed to growing up in the rural South. Someone growing up on a farm versus a city, and so these things are these differences are quite significant. And so all of these things, and then the gap and the age scrap, the age gap and the generational issues is huge. But to start off with, the thing that's hardest to understand is that your soul has only probably a small number of people that are potential spouses. Like there's times people marry somebody and they're not in your soul group. Like souls come from different parts of the universe. I mean, it's like, I can't, this is not something that's, I mean, as concrete as, ethnic things and, things that you can see in the material world, difference in cultures. But there is differences in your soul group. There's a very small number of people you can connect with and have lifelong relationships with in terms of your soul group. Like you might have some connection to your family, but they're not really part of your soul group, and that happens quite often. Like you have some area where you grow up with your family, but they're not really important people into your life, and as you get older, they're just no longer there. They're not. There's no real connection, even though you share, these the intimacy of your childhood and the experiences of your childhood with these people. Even if they're good, experiences, the people aren't that significant. And there's people that come into your life and you wish you could have more of a relationship with them and they just fade away. But there are people, sometimes good, sometimes bad, in terms of your relationships, that stick with you. And, your past experience, either here on earth or even more importantly, somewhere else, like where you are etherically, where your soul is when you're not in a body. And there's different soul groups here. That's why there's like a different, there's, and I've covered this kind of in my book, The Choice, and I know like a lot more about it now. And I still don't know really anything about it because it's hard to know because it's just ideas of an etheric universe that you can't really experience, right? You can only experience it when you leave your body. So it's not something you could have concrete information, but I understand it from just, there's just people in your life that resonate with you. And so that's a small number of people. And then you have to deal with all your life experiences and the differences in your, whatever it might be, age and these things, right? And so, like it's a hard thing. Like that's why relationships are hard, especially now when there's such a diversity within the world, and people are. I mean, there's just all these different types of like in America we have a melting pot of different ethnicities and things like that, and then people marry people from other cultures. But the Sajmark tradition, the Sajmark organization, um, you know, you could see all the relationships that failed because of either I mostly it was about cultural differences. The people that married somebody from a different culture because they'd meet these people at gatherings, and there'd be some past life association. Like I met people from different countries that it was clear that I had a past life with. I had a strong connection with, but it was not something where there was significant differences in our, our perception of the world. And there's just something to be said. My wife and I talk about watching Gilligan's Island, and like, we had a very, just in terms of our, our growing up life, we have a lot of similarities and a lot of interest. Like we both like animals, and my wife would be on the bus coming home from camp with a toad in her pocket, and the guy would make her get it. If the bus driver found out, he'd make her go let it. Like these things, and we just have these similarities of things that we like to do and like our experiences, and that's like really important because it's just really hard anyway, right? We don't have in the modern day culture, we don't have extended family, like we don't have. And there was, when people all live in the same village and they marry someone from the village, the whole village was be a part of that relationship, extended family, and there'd be a lot of support and a lot of support system there. And so it was people who grew up and this is going to be your life. But in the modern day life, there's so many different choices, so many different careers. You can go live anywhere. You can move out of the country. You have so many different choices. Whereas, like, when you have limited choices, it's a lot easier to have a successful marriage. When you know what your life is going to be, like you're going to grow up and do what your family did, you're going to be a farmer, or you're going to be a part of a tribe in a village, and that you're going to be in this region, you're going to live in this area the rest of your life, wherever you're born, and you're going to be a part of this group. It's a lot different than when you have all these choices, right? And then all the other, stuff here that people get into, like in terms of belief systems. I mean, everybody who wakes up and their spouse doesn't, it's a freaking nightmare. No matter how, all the other things are there. You have past life connection. You have similar ages and similar cultures, but then you change your belief system radically, and you leave behind these shared beliefs you had with this person. And this is happening all the time now. That's why it's like these relationships are really hard. And when you bring in the idea of divorce, I mean, in cultures where the divorce is really not a thing that you do, like India's now, there's a lot more divorce in India, but when there was no option, you would make it work, right? When divorce isn't an option, you can make it work. So all these things, right? But the spiritual stuff is like the most important, and it's really hard to figure that out. Like I mean, you just kind of feel it when you've had some kind of long association with people. They just feel like you've known them for a long time when you just meet them, and that's like there's indications of that, in the material world. But it's something you can't see it for what it is because it happens on the spiritual world. And one of the things that worked in the arranged marriages that I saw in India were the people had faith, like Master Charji would arrange these marriages. And when that happened, the people had faith in it. Like I talked to a number of couples who came from completely different states, and the states in India means totally different languages and totally different customs, and often a prejudice against other states. Like there's a prejudice there, and castes and the other caste stuff, right? Because there was no, there's these intercaste marriages that Chargy, arranged, and sometimes the families would be totally against it. Like there's this one couple, and both of the families in India, get guns are not as prevalent as in America, but both families wanted to get guns, and they had guns, and they were going to go after the other family. It was like a whole feud, and the woman was a doctor, and the guy was a military guy, and she would have these stories about the guy and what a crazy man he was. But Chargy had arranged their marriage, and there's just no consideration that there'd be a divorce. They just had total faith in it. I talked to another couple that was not as, the differences weren't as dramatic, but they were from quite different places, and they looked different. They had different like skin tones. Like one was light skin, the other's dark skin, and they just said there were some issues they had to work out, but they made it work because their faith in the master, the system, and God, right? If you believe that the person's, this is your spouse, and really knowing, because people have doubts in America and Europe and these places because you have a lot of failed relationships, like the dating process, where you date people you're never going to marry, and you date people that the relationship's doomed to failure, and people have ideas of appearance, like what someone's going to look like. That's the worst thing. People have these preconceived ideas these sort of women who plan their marriage at a young age, girls who plan their marriage at a young age and have this romantic scenario, and from watching movies, and guys who want a woman who looks a certain way, and everyone thinks they have a type that's like a physical, appearance type, like that, thwarts the process, right? Because it's the person's soul that's important. Like I was saying before, someone who has a soul that is, resonates with yours, and you have past life association. And when you have, prejudices against, way people look or whatever it might be, all kinds of different, body types, and you're not able to see to on a soul level. And so these preconceived ideas and past failures and hurt and, abandonment shit, or trust issues that people get, and the fact that, like, there's no help from other people to help point you like elders who can kind of point you the way to the right person. That people are out there just randomly in these relationships, and most of them are doomed to failure. And so you have doubts, and then when there's issues, the doubts just expand and are there. And then when you've been burned in the past, you have these fears that things go in the same way or whatever, and oftentimes they do, because there's some scars that you have, and they're, if you have trust issues, they'll be there in every relationship, right? If there are some scaric based trust issues from previous lives, then previous life, your significant other, or you're going to imagine them even if they're not there, right? You're going to be suspicious and paranoid, and so this is like the mess that our modern day relationships are, and the idea that you can get divorced makes it so much easier for you to start thinking that way, like that there could be. Like every time it's a bad situation, you can say, "Oh, I can get out of this thing," right? And so, and that's why there's so many failed marriages, because all of those factors. Like, people pick the wrong people to begin with. They don't have any support from the elders in the community. Marriages are doomed to fail. There's hyper, emphasis on sexualization in our media, and there's just all these, other factors, divorce, and other things that go along with it, as being always an option. And so that's why you have the mess that we have, and the division in the family now, and the cultural differences, and then the stress of both people working now, because having one person at home and keeping the because the home life is a full-time job, right? And so when you got two people working, the kids are out, the family's always diffuse, and then all the effort it is to divide the family anyway by the beast. So that's why marriages fail. It's almost a miracle when there's like a good solid marriage, and people are changing so much now too, which is like, is you might be right for somebody in one area but not so much later. So then this was a couple funny comments here. Paul curses 100 times in the first 25 minutes of this video. There's no way it's 100 times. Like, it's just no way, right? Sits in his tower smugly talking down to everyone like a fourth grader, trying to impress his older, trying to impress the older kids. No grace, no humble, no gratitude, just a spiteful know-it-all. This channel has devolved to the vibrational level of the Hawk to a podcast. Um, there's you're exaggerating, right? Like, there's not 100 curses. The thing that I was humorous to me about this, Paul curses over 100 times in the first 25 minutes of this video. You watched 25 minutes and felt this way? Like, this is the issue, right? Now, this video was entitled "Your Personal Jesus, Your Own Personal Jesus," Aaron Rodgers, Stephen A. Smith, and Ryan Clark beef. So the own personal Jesus, this person's more than likely a Christian, right? And believes in the Bible, which is okay. Like, there's plenty of places for you to get that, but this is the only place where someone's going to say what I say about it. Like, it's a very unique perspective. I don't know how many people have this kind of perspective and can articulate it because of their, my doing a spiritual practice for over 30 years. And the Hatua girl is really kind of stupid and low consciousness, low vibrational. But me coming in, and regardless of the swearing, that ding was my wife just texted me that she loves me. Regardless of the swearing, this is sophisticated understanding of spiritual principles and teachings, right? Now, if you're a Christian and you believe in the Bible, it would be maybe offensive to you that somebody would believe those things and say those things, but some of them are just straight out fact. The Bible has been changed and manipulated. And, talking about the cultural differences, and I wasn't going to, that comment just came in, so I wasn't planning this. These other comments are from yesterday. The comment I read you about the marriage was from this morning. But this cultural differences, there's differences in language. Like in the Persian language, there are so many different ways to say the word love. Where there's one in English, but there's all these different words for it. And, nuances to it. Like, so you have, these various, the language differences are significant. So just the translation twice of the Bible, because it was started off in Aramaic, I believe. Some of it's in Hebrew, some of it's in Aramaic. And then it was translated into Latin. And then, of course, various other cultures and of course, various other languages in English. And then, this was old time English, right? Thou art, hath thou, these words that we don't even fucking use anymore, right? And so there's all these words in it and expression that are, they're dated by age. Like, this understanding of the culture of that time was have to be there to understand why things are said a certain way. And, any sort of metaphor is going to be based in like people living without electricity and living without plane flight and living without knowledge of other cultures and time zones and all this stuff to do with God picking up the earth by the four corners. Like that's because they were limited in their understanding of what the world was like because they were just walking around in a small area. They didn't have the ability to travel to these other continents and cultures and things like that. And the teachings and the writing was done for people of that time in that area. And that's all fact, right? And so, there's things in there that don't make any sense at all. And the amount of sacrifices and blood sacrifices and sacrificing animals and sacrificing kids and, the war stuff and cutting off the foreskins. I mean, all the stuff in the Old Testament, where David he wanted to marry the king's daughter. And the guy said, bring me 100 foreskins of the Phoenicians or one of those, one of those other groups, right? Their enemy. And he said, David went out and got 200 because he was a go-getter. So, a lot of stuff in there is just fucked up, right? And some of the stuff is just, word of mouth translation and then them editing, they've edited out. Like that's fact that they edited the Bible. They changed the Bible. And based in their desire for religious dominance, they wanted to make Jesus the only representative so that they could have the official exclusive right to heaven. They wanted to trademark heaven and God, which you can't do. That's just bullshit. That's never something you can do. You don't get exclusive rights to God. And them doing that is such a dick move. And it's caused so many problems globally, war-wise and abuse-wise, and this idea that this is the only way you can get to heaven. It's bullshit. It's just wrong. And, whatever you want to say about it, that's like it's just there for you to see. Anybody can, if you read the Bible itself, like I said, people were quoting me as saying, Jesus is God's only son, but there's a prayer called Our Father. And Jesus used to refer to God as our Father, like all of our fathers. So why is he the only son, right? What were the rest of us, stepchildren? That's what I said in the previous video. But again, going back to this guy's comment here, where he says, Paul curses over 100 times in the first 25 minutes of this video, sits in his tower smugly taking down everyone this and fourth grader trying to, this channel has devolved into vibrational level of Hawk to a podcast. Now, my videos are more refined. Like I've gotten better. I've evolved personally, right? But how long have you watched my videos and not had a problem with the way I present things? I'm not like more arrogant, and if anything, I'm less arrogant because before when I made videos, I thought I knew things that I don't think I know now in terms of like truth or stuff. Like I'm much more believing that like you'll never know any of this stuff, what's fake, what's real, and how to interpret it, and what's God's intention, and just all of it. Like I'm less convinced about the reality of any of this stuff. Like it all becomes more and more illusionary in one way or another. The illusion of life, right? But I see things clearer. So it's just a combination of those things. But either way, like how long did you watch these videos and listen to me before you became offended and butthurt and compared me to the Haktula girl? Right? Because, you just admit like what you're upset about. Like I was talking about Ryan Clark, right? And how he hated Aaron Rodgers and told stories about it. He hates the guy, but doesn't disclose that when he's going after him that he has a grudge, right? And these things. And so if you're upset about a thing, just admit it. Like admit why you're hurt or why you're upset because I believe something different than you, and I've expressed what I believe, and it's not what you believe, and so you're mad at me, right? Just express that part. Be honest. This isn't about the swearing. It isn't about any of those things. It's about I said something that offended you, and it's more than likely because the content was about your own personal Jesus and rearranging your, each person having their own idea. This just goes with the relationship thing too. Each person would describe Jesus differently, and they have their own, version of Jesus. All Christians and non-Christians, and so all these things are, if you're not flexible and not can't see that you've been indoctrinated and there's a lot of bullshit in your religion, and that the religion itself is fucked because of they're they're usurping God's position. They become middleman where they put a God tax on your relationship with God, and they don't present God in a real way, and so they actually are blocking your connection to the divinity within you, and that there's a higher level. And so, yeah, that sucks to hear for some people, but it's true. You can go to these other channels that will tell you will repeat your indoctrination and bolster your indoctrination. But, that's not truth. You're not a truth seeker. Like you deep down, you're being lied to. But, if you think you got a ticket to heaven and then someone says, yeah, that's bullshit, that sucks for people. Like that's really hard for them to wow, maybe you're right. Maybe I'm not going to heaven. Like maybe this is bullshit. Maybe I have to do more than it's never that easy, right? The spiritual life, the spiritual journey is the hardest thing that you'll ever do. It includes all this bullshit that you have to go through in the material world, but it's also your internal world. You have to change your attitudes. Changing is what people don't want to do. People don't want to change. I mean, that's the bottom line. And so then there was another comment where the person writes, I farted to show support for this channel. That was, for use your effing noggin, but it was the direct comment after that one. And so, that's nice of you. Uh, but then there was this comment, more drones than Luigi spins Fetterman and Jay-Z Beyonce. Paul, why do you have such a potty mouth? And I don't know if I banned the person or not, and I'm going to answer this question seriously. But because potty mouth is funny. Like I say potty mouth all the time. And so if there was an explanation for my potty mouth, it was that my dad encouraged me to swear. My dad was allowing me to say fuck when I was 5 or 6 or 7 years old. He took me to Blazing Saddles, which was an R-rated movie, which is totally inappropriate on his part. And a bad movie. It's like crappy Mel Brooks movie. But I remembered a conversation. I told this to my wife the other day. That I went to school, and I don't know how. I don't think I believed in the stork. I don't think I understood where babies come from, right? But I understood what fucking was, right? Like as a kid, like that we were talk about that. Like my peers in my school were using the word fuck. We were, 6, 7 years old. And one of my friends said, the only way that you can have babies is to fuck, right? And so this upset me so much so that I was in our family's Ford Maverick, which was a not of high class vehicle. And my sister ended up inheriting the Ford Maverick, and she would turn off the ignition, take the key out, get out of the car, and it would still be bucking and running for another minute. Like, but I'm in the back of the car, and my mom's driving, and I'm upset about this thing, and I'm like, Mom, some kid at school said the only way that you can have. My mom's a small Irish Catholic woman who was very upset at me swearing, but like she could do nothing about it. She was always kind of a worrier, and whatever. Because my dad was, he was, my mom would say, "Oh, Ralph," like Ralph and Rita Romano, right? So, "Oh, Ralph," and so she'd be upset at my dad. She was oftentimes upset at my dad. There was differences. My mom was an only child, and there was cultural differences there. And my dad was a narcissistic piece of shit, and just not very lovable. I'm sitting there with my mom, and this is exactly what I said. There's a kid at school that said that the only way that you can have babies is to fuck. You and Dad didn't do that, right? And my mom said, "Well, I wouldn't put it quite that way." I was appalled that my parents would do such a thing, right? Like I was how I don't want to say prudish I was, but I was a little kid, and how like that just seemed like it blew my mind that was something my parents would engage in, fucking, as I understood it as a 7-year-old kid. I grew up and my dad swore, and you know all of that stuff. So there's a period of time where I tried not to swear when I had kids, young kids, and it's not a valued thing in Sajmarg. It's not something that the Sajmarg is refined, the spiritual organization. And there was a time where I was in a bathtub, or my and my stepson said I can't get this fucking thing on, right, which clearly came from me, and like the whole house went silent, right. I knew like I was my ex was trying to get me to swear less, and so I worked on that for a period of time, and then of course YouTube started to punish people for swearing. And now that's why I don't swear in the beginning part of the video, but it's just kind of how I express myself or whatever it is, right? It's because it came up twice here, and I had a woman who wrote a letter, like wrote a comment, like this is like 5, 6, 7 years ago, some older woman, and she wrote this comment saying, I was about to sit down and watch one of your good videos on a Friday night, and then I heard you swear, and I said, you know what, I'm going to do something else, right? And I read the comment. It was one of the first comments, like, back when I was just starting to do the comment as far as the video. And people are like, I love it when you swear, right? That's how it is. Like, there's people gonna love it and hate it. But it's, more authentic to who I am, right? And, it is what it is. Sometimes you'll swear more. But if you're getting offended about it, like, it's just like with everything else I was talking about at the beginning, we have different cultures, different upbringings. And, my upbringing was, I was in a family that swore, and I was around people that swore, and then my college years and all my friends. I mean, it was something that was there, and so if you didn't have that, you didn't have that. But some of us, it's just common. Like we were a lot meaner. I grew up in Connecticut in the Northeast, where people are just a lot harsher, and we used to make fun of each other a lot more. The cultures in the East is a lot more aggressive. In Boston, and New York, and New Jersey, and those areas, Connecticut, New England area, people are city life, and people are a lot more aggressive, and they're just we're a different type of people, and that's where I grew up, and my family was brutal. We used to make fun of each other and all these things, so it's just what it is. So if you understand that, like that's how I was taught, and that's what I was a part of, and I'm not I'm not like invested in that, but it's just familiar to me, right? It's how I express myself, and so I can, work out not swearing. But sometimes the swears are funny and they're timely, and you can always find reasons to pick something apart, and especially if you're offended by something else, right? Like, is it the swearing, or is it that I criticize and it isn't a criticism. Most of the stuff I said is factual, and the rest of the stuff is true. Like, it's not something I can prove factually, but the Bible was edited, right? And they purposefully, the Council of Nicaea, one of the goals was to make Jesus the only God, and their religion the only path to heaven. and that way they could get people recruited from the other religions that, it's like, they had to deal with what again, like I'm not recruiting people. Like I don't give a shit if you do Sajmarg meditation. I would like people to do it, but only if it works for them. Like I don't want people to do it. I had some woman who wrote me, and she had been a long time viewer, and she wrote me this. She wrote a comment where I was criticizing flat Earth stuff, and she wrote this very critical comment, like just like something that I would obviously ban her for. And I banned her, and then she wrote me a long letter saying, she had done Heartfulness back when, Heartfulness was, I didn't know Dodgy had shit to bed. And so she said, I did it for you. And I'm like, why would you do it for me? Like, it's weird. Of course I wouldn't want that. And like she was, she had all this victim consciousness and reasons why I shouldn't ban her for something that I say this is what you get banned for. And she said a bunch of other weird shit, like just, she had trust issues, just like all these, but she obviously said the comment because she wanted to get banned, right? Like she did it, she wasn't even kind of aware of it, like whatever reason, like she was having doubts or whatever. But like I don't want people to do Sajmarg because of me, even my family members. Like if it's something that they have to like to do, it's, it's their spiritual, if they're invested in something, you can't do it because somebody else says it's good. I mean, that's why I always say I don't recommend things, because I don't. Like I don't want people doing stuff because I said it, right? That's like I don't want that kind of power and control in people's lives, and it's wrong. Like it's, it's your decisions to make, right? But in that, like I understand that the Sajmarg method, in my understanding, is the solution to this current crisis. It helps people connect to God in a way that other systems don't offer because of the lack of transmission and cleaning. There's lots of great spiritual philosophies, and there's different spirit. Any organization, religious or spiritual, spiritual is something that connects you to God or helps facilitate a connection to God. In religion, you can become spiritual through your religion. You can graduate to everything has like some like levels of mysticism in it. Being a mystic, being someone who is connected to God internally, right? There's always the higher available to people. But the Sajmark system facilitates this connection differently because the transmission helps you experience divinity on a much higher level than you have able to have access to. Oh, I know what I'm going to want to talk about. It just came back to me. But let me finish this and I'll say this stuff. It's about spiritual conditions. I'll talk about that next and then wrap this thing up. But Sajmark has this cleaning also that helps get rid of all the things that block your, connection to God. And it's unique for this particular time. And it's not it's a natural system, but it's, it's a gift. It's like something where you get things you don't really deserve, which is always a problem. Like it's, offering spiritual evolution that you haven't worked for, and it's a shortcut. And there's problems because of that, because people haven't earned something, and it's a big jump. It's like taking an amoeba to a person, right? Let's say an amoeba has to then become like a insect, and the insect, like your soul, like it's a path of your soul, like your soul, you incarnate as an amoeba, and then you become something more complex, like another type of small microscopic life form that's more complex than amoeba, and then you become like an insect, and then you become like a mouse, and then you become like you go through these various stages, right? You become a lizard, then a mouse, or whatever it is. It's called transmigration of the soul, and then eventually you become a dog or a cow or something, a domesticated animal that serves humans and is around humans. Animals that are around humans have a chance to move up in terms of their spiritual evolution to become a human in their next life, right? Your dogs, your pets, they have this opportunity. And you could go backwards. You can go from a human back, like that's a, whatever it is. But on a spiritual level, in terms of what's offered in Sajmarg, it's like you go from an amoeba to a human and you bypass all these other stages. And so there's reasons why you go slow and you go through these stages, slowly mastering a higher level of consciousness until you migrate into something more, more advanced. And that's, how it has to be. So the Sajmark system, it's natural. It's called the natural path, but it's also a shortcut. and there's problems, and people suffer from it, right? They're not ready for that kind of evolution, and it's the reason it's being done is because it's like a frickin' Hail Mary, because the human race has not evolved on our own. Like we've degraded into materialistic material focused beings, and we're not focused on our soul and our soul's path. We're lost. We're a lost species. And the Sajmark system has been given as like one last chance for people to get elevated. So that's what I believe about the system. But in terms of, converting people, I'm just not into that, right? And there's a time where Christianity was, people weren't going to do it. And they had to convert people, right? They had to sell people. You were pagan, you were something else. And all these different religious beliefs in Europe, and then these countries that they colonized and indoctrinated, right? The different African countries, the different African people, the different native people in Australia and America, in South America, there's all these natives, these different types of natives, and they all had their own belief system. And they were told you have to do Christianity. Well, what was the reason? Well, because it's the only path to God. And they came up with that because they were struggling to convert people. And so it was a selling point, and they used force. They did it at the tip of a sword, right? You convert or else, right? Or kill your family or whatever. And these missionaries that came in, often, taking advantage sexually of these people they were trying to indoctrinate into their religion. And so the Christian religion has a lot of blood on their hands, a lot of fucked up shit they did to force people to become Christian and to throw away their old belief system. And the religion just isn't that great. And it's very remedial in the Old Testament, and the good teachings in the New Testament are like the kingdom of heaven is within, and God is a divine father, which isn't as sophisticated. The kingdom with God is the kingdom of heaven is within is the best teaching as far as I know in the Bible, the New Testament, and that's just not thought about. They don't emphasize that because they don't want you to understand that you can connect to God internally. And so it's just not that great a religion. It just isn't. Because, it's okay to be born in, but there's so much more that you could experience once you leave the Christian religion. But, that's for each person to figure out. And if that's offensive to you, well, so be it. But that's not my, problem, right? This is what I believe wholeheartedly. It's my reality. And you might not like it, but it's what I believe. The other thing I was going to talk about, and I was going to lead with this, it's called spiritual condition. And it's a part of the Sajmark teaching. And it's helpful to understand this, that even if you don't do the meditation, you have a spiritual condition, and places have a spiritual condition. And you can feel the difference. Like there's places you go that just feel bad, like bars or whatever you go. I talked about strip clubs maybe in my last video. Anything with alcohol and drugs, anything where there's like, if you saw like, you came across a dog fighting ring where dogs were killing each other and people were rooting for dogs killing each other, right? Shit like that, cockfighting. There's a degradation. You see these places in there, plus the animal aspect of it, and the violent aspect of it. Any kind of horror movie, these things have, things that are depicting horrific events. The fear is very prevalent. So there's conditions. Like if there's a house where there's violence and there's a lot of anger, if the people, there's people in the house that are really angry and fearful, you go in there, it's really heavy. There's an energy there, right? My mom went to some cave or something in Europe where all these people died. They were hiding out, I don't know, from I don't know what it was, World War II thing or something, even older than that. And she said the place just felt creepy, right? My family and I drove through a reservation, like it was a Navajo reservation, and there had been, such oppression there. There's just this feeling of depression. We also drove through a place in West Virginia where it was nice, like it was a nice physical, in terms of the environment, the nature part, beautiful area, but it just felt depressed. There's places you go, cities you go where there's such negativity and darkness and energy there. Like it's just the condition. It's a spiritual condition. It's very heavy. It's hard to connect to God. It's hard to meditate there. It's hard to even breathe. The second master of the system, Babaji, went to London, and he said he couldn't even breathe because the atmosphere was so heavy there. And London was always, I experienced that when my family and I had a layover, and we went to one of those castles, and there's just a lot of dense energy there in London. And it's, the economic capital of the world, and all the, when Britain, as they used to say, the sun never sets on the British Empire, and it's just heavy and gross there. This idea of gross and more subtle. And there's higher developed places. I went to a peace pagoda long before I did this meditation. That had good energy there. I've been to natural areas. The Grand Canyon, it has amazing energy there for whatever reason. Like there's just natural places have amazing energy. The Grand Canyon has better energy on the north side where there's less people. Like the south face gets like 20,000 people a day. But if you go to the northern side, the northern face or whatever they call it, there's a lot less people there and the energy's better. And it's just because there's, people contaminate things, right? Your thoughts, if you have a lot of anger or negativity, and, the condition of the world is really bad right now because so many people are distressed and they're worried and they're angry and there's so much hatred in America. You can feel the division. You can feel there's just, people are ready to go all the time. There's always aggression in America that's been heightened in the last 8 years with the division that's been pushed out there in all this way. So like conditions is important to understand. Like everything has a condition, and you become more sensitive, and people have a condition, and people affect you. They resonate energy. There's vibrations. There's particles coming off. We're made out of energy. Our bodies seem hard, and our bodies seem, but there's based in, these molecules and atoms and these, energetic aspects that form what we are as our physical body. It's illusionary because it's made up of pieces. It's made up of small energy, like energetic aspect to our physical being that creates a living machine that is our body, right? And so, like, our bodies are the energy we have in our bodies and our spiritual energy and the thoughts that we have and the attitudes we have and the love that we feel. Like people who don't feel love and aren't capable of loving and are blocked from love and their hearts are shut down, they radiate hostility. You meet people like that. They're just hostile and angry. You feel angry like just being around them because they're, it's affecting your condition, right? Their condition's affecting you because it's all, energy, and it all like, it intermingles and things. It's like they have this aura of bad energy and ignorance and, just bad whatever. And, people who benefit from my videos and feel like the higher nature of my, doing the spiritual practice for years, the transmission of the energies that's there, it's because I've been associated with higher level people, for so many years now, and then meditating and doing this practice, right? As you, gravitate to higher level consciousness, it affects you and it pulls you up, right? Some people are going to pull you down and other people are going to pull you up, right? And it's, it's a kind of a, as you're pulled up by people, you have to make yourself available to whatever way to pull other people up because you've experienced it, right? You've benefited from that process. Being around people that are higher developed is essential. And it's spiritual approach is the other thing, and that's where somebody is on their spiritual journey. But you can be in a higher spiritual approach and can go through something difficult, and your spiritual condition can be gross. Like it can be, you're still at a higher level, but you're experiencing a dark period, right? So they're two different things. Spiritual condition is whatever you're feeling or whatever the place is. It's the energy that's there at that time. And it can be changed, it can be cleaned, it can be made worse, right? It's like all of a sudden, like a nuclear bomb goes off, and then, the condition of all the people, you can feel all this fear in everywhere you are. Like when 9/11 happened, you could feel the fear that was all across America and then the globe, right? And probably places where they're like, oh man, we're fucked now, like places that knew that they were going to be targeted after that, right? Like the anxiety that you feel affects the condition around you. And then there's just fear, like when something happens and everybody's scared or everybody's angry, all the feelings that are there, right? And that, that creates a condition wherever you are. So events can affect people and that, your condition, and that affects the environment and the atmosphere. And it's something to be aware of because it's like if you walk into a situation where all of a sudden I feel angry and you didn't feel it before, it's, being sensitive and conscious of such things because, there's energy that people are exuding and places have energy, right? there might be a restaurant where there's so much anger, and you look around, couples are arguing, and like there's just, there's angry, the people are yelling in the kitchen, and just the place has a bad energy. And there's some places that just have, there's these ley lines that exacerbate energies. Like there's these energetic spots, there's energetic hubs, and the energy is sometimes good. Sometimes the energy is just, it's power, and power exaggerates your condition. So if there's a place that has power and the power is neutral, but whatever you feel when you go on that spot that has a lot of power in it, there's energetic spots like knots and things in the earth where there's different energy. And there's energy where people live. Of course, water is a part of that. Like water, people live near water, and there's energy in water and these things. But power can exacerbate whatever you're feeling, whatever your condition. So if you're worried, the power will make you even more, it'll enhance that experience. It'll drive it further. And so all these things to be aware of, because it's, you're affected by that. People are unaware of how much environment affects them, right? You could be just picking up on other people's, like people's thoughts and things. People could be having thoughts, and all of a sudden you're having them. You could be in Costco or something, or Walmart, and be picking up on the environment, the energy. And so it's just, there's places that you go, where I realize I have to get out of there as soon as possible. Like it's affected me negatively. And I'm like, all right, I'm in like Walmart, and this place sucks, and I got to get in and out, get what I need, and get out of here, because it's just, whatever. Anyways, just some thoughts here. Let's get into the other stuff. Okay, so there's not great audio on this. I'm going to get into the orbs. I want to talk about the orbs in a bit. But, as opposed to the drones and orbs. But this is our commander-in-chief.
What's the explanation for all those drones over New Jersey? What's behind all of that?
Nothing nefarious, apparently.
Nothing nefarious, apparently. When, not Rosie O'Donnell, when Roseanne became a truther in the beginning, and she started talking about Illuminati and blood sacrifice, everybody thought she was talking about it from experience, from her Hollywood experience, right? But, in reality, she was watching videos on YouTube. She was watching truther videos on YouTube and just saying what they were saying, which is often the case when these celebrities or people who are in the mainstream media come to the truth community. They become truthers to whatever extent. They aren't really talking about their personal experiences and with whatever's going on in Hollywood. Like a lot of these celebrities, they might see each other at award shows, or if they work with each other in a certain context, but they don't really hang out. Like they're not, it's this illusion that all these people know each other. Like even in professional sports and things, there's lots of players that really don't know other players that they've played against for years or whatever it might be. And so, and even the players on their own team, like they don't hang out, right? It's just like people at work. You have people at work that you know well, and people at work you barely know. You kind of know their name. You've been working with them for 20 years. So when Joe Biden talks about things like this, you can hear what he says. Apparently, somebody's told him an answer. Like he doesn't have any inside information here because they're telling him what they're telling everybody else, right?
Nothing nefarious, apparently. But they're checking it all out. I think it's just one. There's a lot of drones authorized up there. I think one started and they all got it. Everybody wanted to get in the deal.
One started and everybody wanted to get in the deal. Classic Jojo Magoo.
Often I'll get to use it, like it's because it was like a cursive word or something that's like love.
Wait, what is she wearing? She's like the most annoying. The view ladies are like just off the charts annoying. She seems to be one of the worst. But this was a article in New York, page 6. Joy Behar, 82, fakes orgasm on The View. And so, of course, I had to cover it.
Cursive word or something that's like love all the way around my, and I was like, oh, look at it. It's like almost
like they all have to wear something.
A sleeve. Like it's
It's really nothing. It's not that hard. It's like faking an orgasm.
Like they crack up over the silliest, like worst jokes. Not silly. Silly would imply funny. But well, let's go back to where she said that.
Making an orgasm. Piece of cake.
It's a piece of cake. It's a piece of cake. All the guys I'm with do it. I did this whole thing for that joke. How many guys have you been with that have faked orgasms for you? Do they have to fake? Did they fake their erections too?
Wow. Oh, God. I love it. Oh, my God.
Look at her. Oh my God! Look at she's going to explode. Look at she's going to claw out her eyes and she's exploding. She's like some kind of demon has been aroused inside of her listening to Joy Behar say this stuff, right? Look at her face. Like, what's happening here? She's like, make it stop.
It's nothing. We're all very practiced at that.
We're all very practiced at that, right? You're also practiced on boner shrinkers, right? You're very you're very practiced on shrinking boners as well. Okay. Whenever I am scrolling through my YouTube feed on my phone, in terms of I'm on the YouTube app, and it has all these recommended videos, all things that YouTube recommends me. And I know they're never going to recommend me anything from truthers. There's certain things they just won't. But there's certain things, if you click on it, you'll be seeing videos like that for months. And the other day I clicked on Joy Behar saying something. It was in a video a couple days ago. I forget what it was. And now I'm getting all these view videos. It's always the worst ones, like some of the worst clips, and it's a bad show. Like, you can take any part of the show and mock it. But this is Ana Navarro.
People are always saying, you all in the media are chasing the shiny objects. But
Okay, who are the people saying that? In what context are they saying that? Why are they saying it? You guys are all taking the shiny objects. Who's saying that and why? Right? Because, is it a lot of people or what? Is it everybody? Like,
problem is, how do you not report on the stupid things he says? And so when you...
So it's Donald Trump. Well, you just don't talk about it. You just say, all right, I'm no longer talking about this. You guys' whole business model is predicated on talking about Donald Trump and what he says. It's what you guys do more than anything else. Like the past so many years, Trump has been your number one topic. And every time he does something, you cover it. You don't have to do that, right? You're just promoting what he's saying. It's not like imperative that you do say something. You wouldn't have content if you didn't. That's what you should admit, right? That it drives the needle. Like when people criticize your Trump content and say you're promoting his ideas, which is he's saying here, it's true, you're doing that, and say you're doing it for ratings, right? Like you have to talk about it. No one said you have to talk about it. Who said that?
report on the stupid things he says, you end up discussing things like, is Kamala Harris black? Not because we think it, but because he said it. I mean, we've talked about it on this table at least a couple of times, not because any of us think, we all know she's half black.
Wait a minute. See, The View, they were talking about how they fact check everything. And they have people fact checking everything. Donald Trump did not say she wasn't black, right? Or the narrative that was there. He was talking about her, that he always thought that she was just Indian. I don't know what else he said about it. But that one quote was, he said, I always thought she was Indian because of whatever reason. And that's what she was marketing herself as in the beginning. But, the black is not a definitive term, right? Because if you're talking about black as a color of your skin, well, there's Indians, there's East Indians, and there are Middle Eastern people who are not African, right? They're not from Africa. And there's Aboriginals from Australia who are different. They're not the same race, right? There's a different race completely. And they're different from each other. Those are three different races where people have dark skin, right? My skin in the summer is brown, and a little bit now, less or so. But I'm never white, right? But people would consider me white, and that's, whatever, Caucasian. And so there's there's the color of your skin. So when you say black, it's not really, what people mean is African American. And she's not African American, she's Jamaican. And there's a big difference between being Jamaican and being African American, right? growing up in Africa is different than growing up in Jamaica, as opposed to growing up in America, as an African American. They're different. They're different cultures, and being from the islands is different from being from these other places, right? And in her Jamaican part, which she's saying she's half black, some of that was a slave owner from Ireland, so she's somewhat Irish. I don't know what percentage is Jamaican and what percentage is Irish, but she has that in her system. She has, on her father's side, Jamaican Irish, and her mother's side, she's from Tamil, India, which is different than other places in India, right? So it's more sophisticated than she or Trump or any of these people are saying. But the reason they're saying is because she went to a historically black college, and she did some other things that were about like that kind of those cultural issues. She had a nanny who was African American, but the most part she grew up in a college town, right? All these things we used to talk about when people cared about Kamala. But in reality, it's more sophisticated than anybody's saying. But what they're saying is culturally, she doesn't come from an African American family that grew up that were slaves in America, right? Her dad or her ancestors were slaves in Jamaica, or perhaps, or whatever that was, right? I mean, she's got ancestors of slaves owner, and so it's complex. And Trump and them saying that was that she was faking her African Americanness, which she is to some extent, right? Because she didn't grow up. She grew up with an Indian mother. More than anything else, the Indian side of her family influenced her. She grew up with a mother who just left, first-generation immigrant from India, and she raised, with that kind of culture. And so, like, that's, what she grew up as. And then she lived in Canada and places like that, right? She was in these college towns. And so what she was portraying herself as was not accurate.
But because he says stupid things, we've got to then go and discuss stupid things. And I absolutely...
You don't have to. Like, you want to, or you're told to. But mostly you want to, right? That's the thing. Don't say you have to. No one making you do this isn't mandatory. It's part of your business model.
Think that Donald Trump is held to a different standard than, frankly, any normal human being.
That's right.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? The fact that you guys are obsessed with him, right? Anything that he says has to be dissected over and over again. And you don't talk about everything he says. You don't talk about the good things he says. You don't talk about the things that he says that are positive or things that you agree with. You only talk about things that are sound bites that are either said to trigger you or to support you, get support from his base. But that's what you talk about, right? Like, it's just like this silly stuff. They're the worst. It's by far the worst show out there that's considered news or whatever, opinionated journalism. Okay, so this is from page 6. I used to look at page 6 in New York Post every day, and sometimes I don't get to the news because I already have so much to cover. And sometimes, I look at it less than I used to. But I usually scroll through it. It's where any kind of celebrity stuff, I don't cover celebrity stuff as much, so, but still I look at it. And there was this movie called It Ends With Us, and I saw the trailer a little bit. I could barely sit through it. And it's Blake Lively, who's married to whatever his name is, Ryan Reynolds. And, Ryan Reynolds, I used to think was funny, and then I realized he's just annoying. But his wife seems to be much worse. And they covered this movie, which was about domestic violence, where her lover, her boyfriend or whatever, is beating her, and it's something she grew up with, right? And she's a model, like, not a good actress. I don't have much experience, in terms of her movies, but what I've seen, like, she doesn't, whatever. She's not great. But it talked about, like, so many scandals and the set of the movie was a disaster, and she's high maintenance and a nightmare. And she was bitchy to this woman in an interview. I looked at some of these things and decided not to cover them because I really hadn't covered her before, and it really wasn't, the election was going on. But I saw this stuff, some of the headlines I clicked on, some of them I didn't. But the New York Post and page 6 were slamming her for her performance and, being disingenuous, this topic. And the movie apparently bombed and is a shitty movie. And so that went on for months. Like, I just saw things for months about it. And then this came up. Blake Lively accuses It Ends With Us co-star Justin Baldoni of sexual harassment, attempting to destroy her reputation. And so Blake Lively has accused her ex-co-star Justin Baldini of sexually harassing her while filming Ends With Us, months after rumors of on-set conflict plagued the romantic drama release. There was just so many things that were there. Blake Lively and Justin Baldini's It Ends With Us feud, everything we know. I'm not going to get into that. But, it's a lot. The actress, 37, alleges in a complaint obtained by Page Six there had been an all-hands meeting, the lead actor and director's bad behavior, in which he was warned, I guess he directed the movie, was warned to no longer show Lively nude videos or images of women, and to stop mentioning his past porn addiction and sexual conquest. Lively's husband, Ryan Reynolds, was reportedly present for the discussion. Now, that might not be pleasant, but that doesn't sound like sexual harassment, right? Baldini, 40, was told no longer make any mentions of the cast and crew's genitalia. Well, that's inappropriate, right? That's but it's not like newsworthy, right? Like this is, a trip to HR. Inquire about the age of Adeline's star's weight or her dead father, as well as requests to not add more sex scenes, oral sex, or climaxing on camera outside the scope of the pre-approved script per the complaint. So, these things don't sound all that bad. I mean, for a degraded place like Hollywood. And some of the things that we've heard, the casting couch, the Harvey Weinstein stuff, right? This doesn't seem like sexual harassment. And so, but there's one great one coming up here. And so there they are together. It says the former co-stars, however, worked with intimacy coordinators on set, which Baldini once said was so important to have so they could all feel safe and ensure that the scenes were elevated. There's no elevated. It's like physical abuse and, softcore sexual whatever interactions. I mean, this is like a chick flick, one of these China chick flicks that, His and Wayfair Studios attorney Brian Friedman tells Page Six in response to the complaint, which is a precursor to a lawsuit, it's shameful that Miss Lively and her representatives would make such serious and categorically false accusations. These claims are completely false, outrageous, and intentionally salacious, with the intent to publicly hurt and rehash a narrative to the media. Friedman, where is it that happened? Rehash, here we go. It popped there with an ad. Friedman claims his client previously hired a crisis manager due to the multiple demands and threats Lively allegedly made, including threatening to not show up to set, threatening not to promote the film, ultimately lead to its demise during the release if her demands were not met. And so there they are. There's the dude there. In August, multiple sources told Page Six that Baldini had allegedly made Lively feel uncomfortable while filming the hit movie based on the top-selling Colleen Hoover novel by the same name. She also reportedly felt Jane the Virgin alum fat-shamed her by asking an on-set trainer how much she weighed since previously suffering a back injury and had to lift her up in one of the scenes. Now, that is not fat-shaming, right? Like, that's not fat-shaming. In terms of if you had a back injury, unless he was doing it to be a dick, but even then, it's not fat-shaming because your weight is your weight, right? Like, he didn't say, oh, my God. He didn't pick her up and say, oh, my God, you threw my back out, you fat bitch. Like, that would be more to it. But, either way, it could be true. Like, in fact, his back could be thrown out. But it was before. If you have a bad back, you kind of have to think about what you're lifting up or who, right? I mean, maybe you should have thought about that before including that in the scene. But saying to his trainer, how much does she weigh, in that context is a legitimate question, right? But either way, that's not fat shaming. Going up to a woman and say, how much do you weigh is not fat shaming, right? You wouldn't do it like it's crazy. Why would you do it, right? Past interviews of hers resurfaced online, for instance, showing her making a snide remark about an interviewer's stomach bump and using a transgender slur. Remember, this was all stuff I saw before. But none of that stuff sounds all that bad. And maybe if you were there, you would think it was worse. But like Blake Lively sounds like a real nightmare, right? And the movie sucks. It's just one of these sucky movies, some chick flick, and it's about domestic violence, and it just shows you like the prima donna nature of Hollywood and this particular person. One of my viewers sent me this. It's because this woman's on it. There's Cenk Iyengar. Is that Jordan Peterson? This is some right-wing guy that's on YouTube. And Piers Morgan, uncensored.
The Democrats have got to move on quickly, haven't they?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. She's indulging delusions of running for governor in California in 2026 and perhaps even running for president in 2020. And I just want to echo what a lot of you guys already said. This past week has been harrowing for me. This Saturday, I went on Fox and Friends and I said that Democrats have a stench of loser hanging over them.
Yeah.
As soon as I said that, there were boycott campaigns against me, unblock, unfollow campaigns. I lost 40,000 followers.
Really?
In 4 days. People have
It's just so sad.
called me the W word. I don't know what we're allowed to say, but you can fill in the blank.
We're
They've called me the
uncensored. Let's say
W
it.
word.
Say it. Say what the word was.
Am I allowed to?
Yeah.
Well, they called me a whore. They called me the
Oh, I thought it was going to be witch.
C word. They asked for me to
Disgusting.
be deported. And you can just search for my
Wait, Democrats asked you to be deported?
name in those terms on X and you'll see a bunch of them. So, you know, all these so-called Democrats, the party of inclusion, the party of diversity, masks off. And it's even worse because they pretend to occupy the moral high ground. They pretend to be, you know, so loving and caring and embracing of diversity. But all of a sudden, when I dare to utter any criticisms of the goddess, Kamala Harris, I get ostracized. Me,
I think they've all moved. They've had to move on from Kamala. No one loved Kamala Harris. She never had a fan base.
after having raised tens of millions of dollars for the party, my donors are pissed. They raised $2.5 billion across Super PAC in the campaign. It's my responsibility. It's my duty of care to ask what the hell happened with that money? Why did we spend it? Why did we spend millions of dollars on five-star hotels for campaign staffers? Why did we spend $500,000 essentially bribing Al Sharpton moments before he interviewed Kamala? These are legitimate questions, but no, in the cult, you can't ask questions.
Yeah.
And
Boom.
leaving the Democratic Party or even questioning the Democratic Party is like leaving a cult. It's terrifying. Pierce, I don't want that. I don't want to be a part of this tent. I don't want to be a part of this craziness anymore. They're accelerating my rightward shift. I don't want this
Or, you know, or you could just not do either.
nonsense. It's just crazy. And honestly, they're shrinking their tent. They're basically telling me to they're pushing me to bring my tens of millions of dollars that I've raised and can continue to raise to a different team that treats me better, that treats me with just common decency, that doesn't call me a communist spy. By the way, the communist regime in China killed my great-grandfather. They don't know my family's history. This is the first time I'm really saying it on air. They are calling me a spy for the regime that killed my great-grandfather. Let that soak in just for a second. That's how disgraceful they are.
Yeah.
And these are the people who call themselves the social justice warriors. They are dabbling. They are going headfirst into racism anytime someone dares to disagree with them. I don't want to be a part of this nonsense anymore. I want to be a part.
Okay, so Republicans aren't any better. Yeah, spoiler alert. But, you know, the Democratic Party folded like a card house. You know, I think it was just a money laundering scheme. I don't think they were seriously running Kamala. And, you know, I feel like Trump was going to win, like Trump was scripted to win. Trump was supposed to be president. This is what the handlers, the controllers said to whatever, the powers that be. And it was going to happen. It looked like it was going to happen no matter what. And so they just took all this money and just divided it amongst themselves. And, you know, that's where you should be focused on, because they just stole your money with no chance of really winning. And then whatever happens in the next election, you know, it's going to be whoever gets chosen or whatever, but the world will be a much different place. Okay, so I want to show you a few videos about orbs. My wife was telling me about people seeing orbs, and the orbs are, you know, that part isn't being discussed in mainstream media as much. It's drones, not orbs, but there's orb sightings. And so I want to go through that a little bit. But let me start off by saying, I've covered orbs before. And it's to do with the Queen of England, the royal, when they're being the coronation of the the whatever it is, the sovereign leader, whatever they call it, the queen or the king. They carry an orb and scepter, and the orb and scepter represent that the queen, Queen Elizabeth and Charles or whatever, is God's representative on earth because they're in charge of the Church of England, right, which is a big religious organization. That's the official Church of England. That is a Christian church where the queen or king is the pope, like basically the highest ranking, not only just a royal, the king or queen, but also in charge of religion. And that person is God's representative on earth. God's representative on fucking earth, right? That's a messed up thing. And, I started to see that there's all these orbs. I forgot there was an orb in that cartoon Heavy Metal that came out when I was a kid. There was a sort of very graphic cartoon, graphic in terms of the violence and sex. It was rated R that I saw when I was in high school. And there was an orb that was associated. There was a variety of stories that were woven together. This orb was a part of the whole thing. But then there's an orb in Justin Bieber's video, which was a weird video. There's an orb that Trump is standing over with some Saudi Arabian leaders, right? And the orb keeps on reappearing. There's one in a J-Lo video. And so I, had a video clip of it somewhere. Hopefully I'll find that video clip. And that'll go with this voiceover. But this orb has been a part. Circular objects are much more natural. Nature doesn't like lines, straight lines, and it erodes such things. It rounds things, right? The wind and the ocean. You throw something sharp into the ocean and you pull it out a couple of years later and it's been rounded, right? Whatever it is, nature rounds things. And so you don't see as many jagged edges and angles and straight lines and things in nature. The idea of the flat earth is, that's one of the reasons why it's, things are circular. Things end up being circular. And, this idea of an orb having spiritual connotation and then, these drones, there are a lot of them that look circular that are orbs. And we'll go through some of that. And, people are reporting seeing them, and it's not being reported. Like it's not being covered as much of the news, the round ones. Because the round ones would imply some sort of technology that normal people don't have. Those are not owned by corporations or average people. Like that would mean that some kind of sophisticated, how does an orb fly, right? Like these drones have propellers. And, they're propeller drones. They're not jets, right? And so how does an orb fly without propellers or whatever it is, right? If something's circular, like it doesn't have wings. So it's not, these drones have wings and have propellers. Like they're built to fly with like using air, these propellers, and then the catching air underneath the wings of the plane. But an orb doesn't have that. So how the fuck are these things up there? I mean, that implies some kind of futuristic technology that either we have and we're not sharing that we have, or the government has is not telling us they have, or it's something else, right? All right, so let's get into it here. Okay, so here's the orb news. NASA veteran saw metallic spherical orbs fly by his plane over Texas. That's from 1 day ago. But his sighting happened years ago. We'll show you his video. Video appears to show strange golden orb over New Jersey. Some of these other, articles and reports here. Dirty bombs, aliens, holograms, and orbs. Drone mania unleashes conspiracy theories. A mysterious orb caught in video zooming over New York City. It's just latest Big Apple UFO. Here are some famous cases. That's from a month ago. Here is the Newsweek article. Video appears to show strange golden orb over New Jersey. This person, Matthew Nelson, has a check mark, so I don't know who he is. UAP sitting in South New Jersey. A couple hours ago, fighter squadron down the road from my house. approximately 15 minutes outside of Atlantic City. Scrambled 4 F-16 fighter jets. My buddy and I were talking in the front yard. A few minutes later, we noticed an extremely bright glowing orb in the sky. It was moving slowly towards my house, and after about 10 minutes, it started moving the opposite direction. It was probably somewhere around 25,000 feet, invisible, for about an hour and a half before we lost sight of it. I used to work on airplanes in the Air Force and also know a lot about drones. I confidently say this glowing object was neither. What the hell is going on in New Jersey? Below are a couple unidentified pics and videos I took from my Samsung phone. So there's the orb there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's clearly not a drone or a plane. And I mean, it's possibly a weather balloon, but you don't see any strings there. I mean, it doesn't look like a weather balloon, and there doesn't seem to be anything there. Looks different. I saw that weather balloon, which you could clearly see was like a balloon. It flew over my house. I had the video of that. And that doesn't appear to be that. And again, if it's going two different directions, like the wind would be only blowing in one direction, right? As you get up to the upper level of the atmosphere. If that's what he's saying is true, then it's... There's a still frame image there. And then another one. It's the glowing part that is concerning, because, I mean, you could say maybe the sun's hitting a balloon, but why is it shaped like that? And it just doesn't seem to be the same as the weather balloon, which was easily, you could see it was a balloon. Like, it was a giant balloon. It was odd. I showed a video of it. But it moved kind of like a balloon. It was, this looks like something different.
As you are, actually.
You're mystified, but you also had an incident yourself, right? What happened?
Well, that's right.
What did you see, and what do you think it was?
Right, and that was in August. I was flying back from Colorado, and I just refueled in the panhandle of Texas in my small airplane, and I was flying back to Houston on an instrument flight plan, and we were in clear air, and I was about 9,000 feet, and suddenly, out of nowhere, these two big metallic spherical orbs, one on top of the other, about 3 feet in diameter each, went zipping by the left side of my airplane, right underneath, about 20 feet away. And I got a good look at them only for a second. And, it happened so quick, there wasn't even a chance to get scared, but it could have been a bad result if they had actually hit me. So
what do you think it was?
That was mysterious. It wasn't on radar. Air traffic control certainly didn't alert me. It wasn't on my display that shows other airplanes that are participating with the FAA required transponders. So I don't know what it was. My first guess is it's some kind of a military program, a drone of some kind. But it's hard to say, right?
Do you think they knew that they were messing around with someone who used to be up on the International Space Station?
Frankly, I think whoever was operating the drone wasn't aware that I was there, right?
Huh.
Okay, so it was military. They would know about flight paths, right? Because somebody hitting a drone and dying, it would be a bad thing. Whatever. But there was this, either he believes that these military, secret programs involve some kind of spherical drones that aren't using propellers to fly, right? Which is a whole nother, they're using some sort of magnetic field, or what's their ability to propel. And they seem to be able to go fairly fast, right? And there have been a number of these sightings now in this past, whatever it might be. This is Orbs in the Sky on YouTube. Drones, planes, UFOs, drone sightings in New Jersey. These orbs in America could be morphine, New Jersey, or deep dive. So the difference between, this guy is a Christian, prepare for December 25th, prophetic world today, God's message. mysterious orbs from a strange formation in New Jersey night sky. Interesting, like if this was a truther, they wouldn't have that. They have this, these are all like independent channels, right? There's not anything from the official news channels about the orbs, because, I said orbs in the sky. So these are live drones shut down military base, battle with orbs. This is when you search for orbs in videos, but not on specifically YouTube. But there's, all these sightings of orbs that are there, and people have been talking about this, but it's all seems to be, not the mainstream media, which is, what happens. The things about all these kind of things, let me just, the images of orbs. The thing about all these, types of events that involve something like this is that you don't get any deeper. When I talked about let me switch over to a voiceover here. So I was covering the Luigi Mangione thing. They had this way of keeping people engaged. The whole shooting thing broke into mainstream news and usurped pretty much everything else was going on. The assassination of the CEO. And then there was, little bits of information and some pictures of the guy all over the place, but they weren't all released at once, right? They were handed out like you were watching an episode of Lost, and there was more of the mystery revealed, and it's a way of keeping you engaged. And then the conversations happen, and the theories happen, and all the stuff happens. People speculate, and then he's finally caught at McDonald's, and then they release his manifesto and these things. And then the story dies out, but it's been going on for a week or so. And the way they release information to get you engaged and keep you engaged and, provide something to make, like talk about at the water cooler at work or, whatever that used to be, right? The internet version of that. And this is how they do it. When they have a plot or storyline that they're going to release over a series of days. And with these UFO type of things, people see things and they're not very definitive. And, to the people that are involved, and that this involves politicians. And then there's videos of people talking about what they saw. And the videos can get redundant. And with the government, the official story is nothing to see here, folks, in some form or another. And then the story just disappears, and, either they're still there and people are watching them. Some people are still into it, like the UFO type people. People who are, this is their thing. People in the local area get into it. They start looking at the sky. And they just stop looking at the sky, right? Then there's just some, holdovers. And no one else really cares anymore. They're like, you still talking about that, right? And so these are the differences in the way these stories go. And, this thing with the orbs is important because there's a number of people that have seen orbs. And that's been reported. And, that would be a level of technology that isn't explained or isn't explainable based in what we have as a government and what individual drone operators have as drones, because those aren't drones if they're circular without propellers, right? And so, they'll say the stuff, it's a weather balloon, it's this, that, and the other thing. It doesn't matter, because if you don't get any kind of an answers, there's no way you don't have the ability to go any further with it, right? Because you see these things. Anybody who's seen UFOs, there's this older couple in my first homestead in Virginia. And my family went over, they were like really good at homesteading stuff. I mean, they're advanced. And they told a story where they looked up the sky, they heard this like monstrous like machine in the sky, and they looked up and there was a huge spaceship, like huge, like football fields, like it was just this giant thing that passed over their house, and it was making this sound. And they had people over for dinner. There was 4 other people, so there's 6 of them. Something like that, 8, 6, something. They're all watching this thing, and they're the whole condition changed. It was like they were in a dream, all of them. And then the thing just disappeared. It just disappeared. Went over their house very slowly. It's something that everyone that was outside should have known. Maybe it was later in the night, right? But then it became like invisible, and they were all like, we just see what we saw?" Like it was just like they were even like in doubt, but they all saw it, right? And so there's things like this that people see, but there's nowhere to go with it. And then it becomes just the memories get diffuse, and you start doubting your own memories with something like this or whatever it might be. But there's been interactions between what people call aliens, extraterrestrials, and human beings for thousands of years. There's all this artwork and things, and there's the pyramids and all this stuff. There's stuff in the Whispers of the Brighter World messages about this, and there's been civilizations far more advanced than ours here on Earth, and there were a time where people here used to live thousands of years, and it's hard to even conceive any of those things, right? There were giants and different species, and of course now there's some giant DNA left where every once in a while in the human genome, where all of a sudden we'll kick out a giant or a little person, but they're completely different, right? They're not, there's some other DNA. I was thinking about why do we have different blood types, right? Like, why are there so many different blood types? And there's so many things here on planet Earth that aren't explained. The guy, Lloyd Pye, there's still videos up with him on YouTube, and I don't know his authenticity or any of these things, but he's a guy that talked about these fused chromosomes in the second and third genome, where it's fused, and it wouldn't happen naturally. Like a chromosome is fused together to make one chromosome, and the explanation is that you have to match up these pairs. They have to be in pairs, and so I forget all the explanation of it, but you couldn't have like 43, you couldn't fuse together a chimpanzee with 43 chromosomes or whatever they have, and an alien that had 42 or whatever, 24 or something. So they had to fuse these together. There's some sort of genetic explanation. And he was saying that there's things like spina bifida in our genetic line, right? And people with spina bifida, and this is many of these different so-called anomalies or disorders, you can't reproduce when you have it. So if a person with spina bifida isn't going to have any children. And there's other kind of genetic anomalies that are there, and we seem to be allergic to things on this planet. Like there's things on that human beings, it's like we're not from here, like to some extent. Like there's some aspects to it like that as well, and so why would we have these things in our genome, our human genetics, if there was no way for it to reproduce? Like you have these traits that are passed on. So you have all these types of disorders that people have, but people can reproduce with those disorders. So you have these things that are passed on, and they're genetic anomalies, right? And he or someone else I was watching about this, I think it was this guy, was talking about if you were going to make a slave, it would be sloppy, right? If you didn't really care about the genome or the beings that you were making, you would put together a slave for temporary use to harvest things for you, do slave work, and then you would leave the planet and leave these slaves behind. And you weren't, doing masterful genetic work. You were just trying to make some sort of hybrid slave that would be able to do the work you needed to be done. Like that would be one explanation. And that there would be all these anomalies in the genetic makeup of the people, like all these idiosyncratic things, mental illness, and these genetic disorders, and they just be there because there was sloppy work that was done, quick creation of a slave with some if you couldn't breathe the atmosphere, for example, if you were like extraterrestrials who didn't do well with Earth's atmosphere, or you needed physical laborers or something, and you take a creature like a chimpanzee and you put some of your DNA there to make a kind of a hybrid where it would be, more evolved than chimpanzee, but still wouldn't be like on your level, but could also do the work on the planet because it would have some local life forms, that were there. And so you understand these kind of, these issues that are there. There's all these unanswered questions, and people don't ask them. Like you see it on these like History Channel, Ancient Alien shows or whatever it is, and there people just think those are goofy, or some YouTube videos. And there's a lot of people out there that really love this stuff and are into it, but there's no real answers. It's all minimal information and a lot of speculation, right? But like I said in a recent video, there is an origin story to the human race, and there might be different origins stories to different races, like different groups of people. There might be a variety of stories, but the one that we have is this goofy one by Darwin that just doesn't hold up, right? And so when they lie to you about where you came from, you start off completely fucked, right? Like you should know where your species came from, especially with all the information and technology we have. And it's known, it's just withheld. At least, it was known at some time. There might be some distorted version of it. But if you don't know where your species came from, and there's issues, like let's say we were genetically manipulated, and there are anomalies in our DNA that need to be compensated for, that we need to be aware of, that would help us, right? Like I remember, I took these tests when I was a kid. I had trouble with my P's and Q's and my B's and D's, and I had some other issues in school. So my mom, who was kind of a hypochondriac and always worried about me, took me for some testing at Yale University, that fucking place, right? And so I remember the doctor that was doing the psychologist, he had a ponytail. And I was like, wow, that's weird. Like, I mean, it stands out in my mind because it was a weird thing for a doctor to have, right? There's a time where my dad, I was talking about swearing, I think in this video maybe? Yeah, the beginning of this video. And my dad was behind a two-way mirror, and I knew he was there. But he was there with a room full of people. He was always embarrassing me because I was shy as a kid. I'm introverted. And my dad was loud and, didn't have a lot of natural embarrassment. He wouldn't get embarrassed. But I'm giving him the finger, and he's in a room full of people. He was pissed at me. But I'm like, well, good, I've embarrassed you. But anyway, I took these tests, and some of it revealed like I had a high IQ and some of these other things, right? But there was some kind of unknown learning disability or something, whatever it might be. And that's all I knew. And so I'm in my 30s, and my ex is homeschooling our kids, and there are some issues there, like, whatever it was, like learning issues or whatever it might be. And she looked into dyslexia, and she's like, I don't know if they have it, but you definitely have it. And she sent me these things that were like, it was talking about me. And I called my mom up, and I'm like, Mom, I'm dyslexic. And she goes, yeah, I know. Those tests that you had when you were a kid. I'm like, why didn't you ever fucking tell me? Like, I've been going around my whole life being dyslexic, and I have no idea of anything about, like what? And so, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. Like, that happened, in a human level. But if there are real issues that knowing where we came from would, and again, people wouldn't believe it now because it's just government bullshit, right? And that's the problem with it. No one believes anything or trusts anybody. But their stories of our origin story would be important, but they just won't give it, right? They don't, they win by, they control things by withholding information. Anyways, there's a comment I want to get to here. Okay, so I just have one comment to get to here, and then I will, wrap this up. Today is this Monday, December 23rd. I think this video is going out tonight. And then I don't know what I'll do tomorrow. Tomorrow's Christmas Eve. I got a voiceover I want to do for Christmas Day. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'll make a short video tomorrow. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But anyways, this person writes, this is my time to, it should be call BS on the whole Hunter Biden narrative and much more. 2. I made 1 and it got copyrighted, so I had to put 2 on the second one. When you see a 2, that's what's happened, something like that. I uploaded and there's some kind of copyright issue I have to take out to get it monetized or whatever it is. But, I've been talking about Christianity and Jesus and things, and just interesting, like it happened around Christmas. I didn't intend that to happen. But the person says this: come to Jesus, not meditation, but prayer to Jesus. I pray your HV dreams and encounters with him so you can let heavenly dreams. I pray you have dreams. I pray you have dreams and encounters with him so you can let others know the truth. You're deceived with this mindfulness. Now, let's just cover that you're deceived with the mindfulness. Heartfulness meditation, which is what has become of the Sajmarg system. Sajmarg means natural path. And so the Sajmarg system was named through a divine process. It means natural path in Sanskrit, like the oldest living language, at least according to this belief system that I have, right? Sajmarg is the method, the kind of the organization, and the organization in terms of its official name is the Sri Ramchandra Mission. The first two masters of the system both had the name Ramchandra. Shri is like Mr. And so you'll see Shri in front of like the Mr. and these things. So it existed as an official form since 1945. And the entire time that I did it, it was called Sajmarg and these things, right? The other things, Sri Ramchandra Mission. And then the fourth master of the system, and I don't want to call him a master, but the guy who was in charge of the mission, Kamlesh Patel Daji, decided to make a subcategory called heartfulness, that this was the same thing, but he made it a separate organization so he could move the shared ashrams, that were part of the organization, into private ownership for himself. I mean, that's something I've been told. I don't have any, data or information that I can validate that that's the case, right? But it's probably the case, right? And his excuse for creating this thing called heartfulness was to make it more user-friendly for people who weren't Indian. It was a lot easier to do something called heartfulness than it was to do something called Sajmarg, right? Sajmarg the name would, people would be like, oh, that sounds weird, right? That's, two foreign words, and, with all the scare, the fear of being in a cult or something, something that's not a part of your culture. And so the heartfulness thing was sold to everybody as that. But then he went about doing stupid shit that would make it so foreigners like Americans and Europeans wouldn't want to do this thing anyway. So that was like, why change the name if you're going to... He catered and tailored it to Indian people. And he doesn't travel, like he's gone to America like once in whatever, 10 years or whatever, twice in 10 years. Charge used to come here every year, the previous master. But either way, you guys who know the story of what I went through, and they, started to work with the UN and do this stupid shit. And the quality of the services, the transmission, the cleaning, dissipated. He just did one dumb thing after another. And so I realized this thing was fucked, and I just went back to doing the old thing and separated myself from this debacle that this clown has created, right? Which speaks to my ability as a truther to, even as painful as something like that is, and as great as the old system is, or the system is still, that I had to break from the organization because it had gone false. And I had saw it go false, right? But in that, let me just get to the mindfulness stuff here, because I'll come back to that part in a second. And so, heartfulness, the Sajmarg system, is about forgetting about your physical body. So you sit in a comfortable, whatever's comfortable for you. Laying down isn't great, but, something comfortable. You can sit in a chair, you can sit on the floor. Like most people can't sit cross-legged. And it used to be a lot more people would sit cross-legged. And now it's more people sitting in chairs. It's very few people sit on the floor cross-legged, even in India, where they're more, they have the better ability to do that. But you sit in a way that your body doesn't interfere. And there's not supposed to be any distractions like incense or music, mantras, any of these kind of things. You're supposed to forget about your body. And you meditate on your heart, your etheric heart, on the abstract idea of divine light, God's love. It feels like God's love, right? The feeling is God's love. The image, the thought is divine light in the heart. And the subtle essence of God in the heart. And you're supposed to forget about everything else. And there's cleaning and transmission that's done, cleaning the things that are obstacles to your connecting with the divinity within you. And the transmission is this divine energy that's coming from a higher level. So you can experience divinity on a higher level of approach than you could based on where you are in your spiritual journey. And it's an amazing process, right? But what I want to emphasize is forget about your physical body and your thoughts, your material life. You're not thinking about your, what you're going to do next, or, your worries, or, your stressors. You're connecting with the divinity within you. You're forgetting about everything else. Where mindfulness is, you painfully think about everything, including your physical body and all your thoughts. And you're supposed to be mindful, where whenever you're doing anything, you just don't drift away. Like if you're washing the dishes, you do it with intention, and you're concentrating. You're not just listening to music and thinking about other things, and you're driving and you're daydreaming. Like that's true meditation. When you get into a meditative state, like you just sort of drift away from reality, and you go into a meditative state, right? But in the mindfulness, it's not that. It's the exact opposite of Sajmarg, which the defunct Heartfulness organization. So Heartfulness and mindfulness are nothing alike, right? But Heartfulness shit the bed, so I went back to doing Sajmarg, and I can't call it that because that's an official name of the organization. Like Heartfulness still owns that name, right? So I called it Gratefulness because being grateful is much better than being heartful, because heartfulness is just some made up bullshit thing, but gratefulness is a real thing, and gratitude is, I talk about gratitude quite a bit. But it's just basically doing the old Sajmark system away from the organization that no longer serves its people the way it used to, no longer does what it was designed to do, right? But a person who calls my thing mindfulness doesn't have a fucking clue at what I do, right? Like you have no idea what I do. Gratefulness is so far removed from mindfulness, they're not the same thing and never have been connected in any way. And so you hear mindfulness meditation because that's very popular. And you think what I do is that, and it's not that. And I would never do mindfulness. It's excruciating. Like it's the opposite of what I would do, right? I don't believe it's effective. And it's instead of forgetting yourself and remembering God, you just are painfully remembering and concentrating on your thoughts and your, everything. You're being mindful about everything. You're aware of everything, material, your physical body. And it's a very mental approach, right? For me, it's the opposite of what I get out of meditation. I would never do that. So, that's where the jumping off point is. You don't even know what I'm talking about. Like you have no fucking clue. Like you kind of hear the word meditation. You don't know what that is. You don't understand that everybody meditates all the time because it's a natural mental state that you get into. Meditation is there whether you choose to do it or not. Your mind enters into a meditative state all the time. And so that's, there's, even if you can meditate on Jesus, right? And so, Jesus and all these other spiritual beings meditated. That's the way you connect to God. Meditating is receiving, prayer is begging. And so, but there's no, this is a remedial mind here. This is somebody who doesn't have the ability for abstract thought and would never understand what I'm saying, right? So here's the other thing. Let me go back and read the comment again. So here it is. Come to Jesus in capital letters with 4 exclamation points, not capitalized meditation, but prayer to Jesus. I pray you, HV, dreams and encounters, have dreams with him. So you can let others know the truth. You're deceived with this mindfulness, right? I did have a dream with Jesus. And in this dream, in the Sajmark system, if you dream of a spiritual master, who I would think that Jesus qualifies in this, I know Jesus had more to go in terms of our understanding of him, right? But it was when I returned to America. And there was a time where the second master of the system documented his inner communing with Jesus. And he said to Jesus, all these Christians, meaning people from Europe and America and other places where there were Christians, are coming to do the meditation. Do I have your permission to train them? Because Babaji was very humble, and he would talk to these spiritual masters and other saints and people, even if he was beyond them. He had gone farther than they did. He would talk to them in a way like that, right? Somebody who was an elder. And Jesus said to him, and I wish I could find the exact quote. I kind of remember where it is. I don't have access to that. These talks. I think it was on a videotape where he was talking to Danish people, and there was a transcript of the video, and I don't even know where it is or how to get access to it. But I read it a couple times. No, that's actually something else that he said about Jesus was involved with Mary Magdalene. He asked Jesus these questions for these Danish people. This came from his diary, his unedited version of his diary, and I don't have either the edited or the unedited. But it might be in the Whispers of the Brighter World, the 4 volumes. If anybody's read that, I've only read the first one. That it's Babaji, talking to various souls, like Babaji intercommune with people. So he intercommunes with Jesus, and he says to him, in fact, I think I looked through those to see if I could find this, but I couldn't. But he says to him, there's all these Christians coming to my meditation. Do I have your permission to train them? And Jesus said to him, yes, I really want that. And I'm blessing, your organization, and I want you to take over Christianity. And I don't know what that means. I don't, on an etheric level. Because he was unhappy with the organizations that now exist that are misusing his whatever, his teachings and his essence for their own materialistic gains. Like he's really done with the whole organization of these organized Christian religions. That's again, you can take that for what it's worth, right? But anyway, so I returned to America, and I have this very vivid dream, and I walk up to Jesus, and I say, because this must be in my subconscious, right? Because I'm dreaming, and I say to him, all these Christians are coming to my YouTube channel, and I want to talk about Christianity, but I don't know if that's, so first of all, the first master of the system, Lalaji, was born in northern India, like where there isn't a lot of gurus and spiritual masters. And Babaji was born in the next village over. And Lalaji was born into wealth. His dad was a really wealthy man. But the British Raj, these Indian kings that were supported by, or were shills and collaborators with the British government, sued his dad and just took all their money. Like the whole everything. And Lalaji's mom died, and she was already dead, and he was like a teenager, and his dad just died he just couldn't deal with it. And so he was married at a young age, like they were married at 14, so he had a wife, where they're still kids and they're not even, they don't engage in sexual activity, they just are married like little kids growing up together, right? And him and his wife lived in this one room and had nothing. He was educated because his dad was rich. So he ends up getting a job in the court, but he's in complete poverty. And he, has these various Sufi spiritual masters, and he has other people that train him, and he has, he intercommunes with God, and he's, a deeply spiritual person. But he doesn't have an organization. And he doesn't have a method yet, like the method that we use now in Saj Marg. And people just come to his house, and he would train them and transmit to them and, do these other things, right? And so he doesn't have, and then when he died, he had all these writings he had, and his family just took them and wouldn't give them to Babaji. And Babaji covered for them and said, that a maid threw them out, threw out all these papers, right? Because Lalaji ended up not being rich, but, eventually becoming middle class, right? Like he went from poverty where he was eating one chapati a day, like a tortilla, right? Really incredible poverty. He lived in one room with nothing, they had a mat on the floor, a cement floor to sleep on, and, and then it gets cold there in northern India. But anyways, the guy most of his writings have now been turned over to the mission, but they're very abstract. They're not really user-friendly. They had this one thing that was a book, and I understood about 20% of it. I would probably understand more because I'm more familiar with some of the yogic terminology, but it's like real advanced old school yogic stuff, right? Yoga, not hatha yoga with the postures, but the other things. And so one of his teachings is you don't criticize people's religion, other people's religion, because that's maybe all they can do. Even if their religion sucks, it's where they are evolutionary, on their evolutionary path. And I've always, valued that. But what I do here, I don't believe it's criticism. It's just telling the truth that people want to hear that come to my channel, right? This channel isn't for, Christians who are doing Christianity and want to hear about Christian things. This is for people who, in many cases, left Christianity or aren't doing anything or, are spiritually oriented, and they need to understand the distinction between religion and spirituality and some of these other things, right? And so, like, I felt like I had to talk about it, but I wasn't all that comfortable doing that, right? And so, this interaction I had with Jesus opened the door for that, because I wasn't talking about this is like 2016 or 17. And so I say to Jesus, all these Christians are coming here, and I want to talk about Christianity, and just all the things I said, right? That's all implied in what I'm saying. In terms of I didn't say those words to him, but it's just a dream, and the meaning being that the whole thing with lology. And he looks at me and says, "Yeah, that's why I'm sending them to you." And I wake up, and so it's my one interaction with Jesus is that he was saying to me, he's sending Christians to my YouTube channel to hear the truth about his message, the true Jesus, right? Like whatever I know about. I'm not an expert in it, but I'm much more of an expert in all the people that believe in the Bible and are taking the indoctrinated, changed, edited Bible's word for Jesus' life, because Jesus was much more than he's presented in the Bible. Much less in terms of, this sale that he's the only Son of God, but much more in terms of his spiritual achievements that are negated by editing and by, they don't want you to do what Jesus did. So they don't tell you of his accomplishments, right? And his higher level teachings. And to whatever I know about them and whatever I know about this in general and whatever I understand about what's been done here, Jesus said to me in a dream, I'm sending people so you can talk to that. You can say these things. And so that's why I talk freely about it, because I don't, again, I'm aware of Lology's teaching about religious criticism. But there are people that need to hear what I have to say, that Jesus wants them to hear that. That's what I wholeheartedly believe, right? I'll include this with my Christmas message. Somebody just sent me a bunch of quotes from Chargy about Jesus. Hopefully I'll remember to read those as well, right? But there's like the true Jesus, and even the sense and the extent that Christmas is almost nothing to do with Jesus. He was not born on December 25th, and the birthday is important. You're celebrating the birth of a spiritual person. I mean, we celebrate people's birth because we're like, I'm so glad you were born. That's why you celebrate somebody's birthday. You are an addition to my life, and you're a blessing in my life. If it's a piece of shit person that sucks and is making the world a worse place and you hate them, you're not really celebrating their birthday. Like you're doing it out of family obligation or whatever. But the people in your life that you love and have helped you and touched you in some way and have been, helped you be a better person, made your life better, you celebrate their birthdays. And more so than anybody else are these spiritual beings that came down and sacrificed whatever they sacrificed to impart to people spiritual training. You honor them on their birthday, and their birthday is special. It's a special day. It's the day they were born. It was the actual day they were born. But the Christian religion changed Jesus' birthday because they suck, right? And I don't know exactly when it was, but they were trying to recruit pagans, people who were into the solstice. So they put it on the solstice, right? And Easter is on the spring equinox, and it's about the goddess Astora. It was a holiday that the pagans celebrated. It isn't Jesus' death, which again is important. The birth and the death of Jesus' actual birthday and death day, which we don't fucking know now, because they fucked that thing up, right? They disrespected him and his, to bring more people in. And so that's the kind of bullshit they're willing to pull. That's the religion, right? The religion has fucked it. Like they've messed the whole thing up, right? And if you go to Christian channels, they're celebrating Jesus' birthday and they're not saying what I'm saying. That's a disrespect. It's an act of disrespect. And so what do we really celebrate on Christmas? Materialism. It's the biggest, it's when these retail stores, of course now they're all struggling with the internet, but in terms of the retail market, it's the month where they're in the black, they're making money. And there's a lot of these, used to be these retail giants or these retail stores, they were in the red all year long, and they would make so much money during Christmas, it would carry them financially through the rest of the year, right? They were losing money the rest of the year, and they were just breaking even, but they would, they would have windfall profits in Christmas season because it was a materialistic big economy day. And then this, this red creepy Santa Claus that's an anagram for Satan sneaks into your house, and you lie to your kids about it, and you give them gifts, and you don't really honor Jesus, right? I mean, for the most part, like we had a little nativity scene with, we'd put baby Jesus in the manger, the manger. It had Capodimonte fine porcelain. My brother, we used to make fun of this, like on this Capodimonte porcelain figurines on the shopping network. We used to watch that and joke about it. But these glass, these sort of these figurines, and had a cow and a sheep and the wise men and Mother Mary and all these things, and a manger, and we put it out there and put the baby Jesus in the last day, right? And so he was thought about a little bit, but really it was about materialism, right? Presents you're getting as a kid, and it's just all those things. And so Jesus's birth isn't he's disrespected. The core teachings are disrespected. His beliefs have been changed. His story about what he was as a person, they've just fucked it all up. That's why he's not happy with it. Of course he's not happy with it, right? Even on a soul level. They've, gone in the opposite direction. He was, a poor person most of his life. He was someone who lived in poverty. He wasn't a wealthy person. He wasn't about materialism. And, you have these mega churches and these things, these gaudy churches with Trump-like, golden altars and all this stuff, right? It's the opposite of what Jesus was about. And so, don't you think Jesus would send people to me? If you're, conscious a little bit? Who's talking about these things? And not that I'm an expert in it, because I'm not. But I know more than other people because I've done my own spiritual practice, and I understand it from a completely different perspective. The third master, the system master Chargy, was St. Paul in a past life. You can believe that or not, but he talked about it. And close to his deathbed, he acknowledged it. He had talked about it in private. There was a talk about it. It was a wonderful talk that they Dodgy erased from the mission. He was talking about that Saj Mark shouldn't become a religion, and Dodgy immediately tried to turn it into a religion. Because religions are for profit. Religions are dumbed down teachings. Religions are indoctrination. Religions are unspiritual. They're a gatekeeper between you and God. And so for those people who can aspire to be spiritual people, this is what my channel's for, right? Now, there's dopey people, and I don't have any relationship with the people who do Saj Marg. There are some wonderful saintly people. I wasn't really friends with them. I'm not a social person. But there's a lot of dopes that do my thing as well. But, I get these comments all the time. Let me read the comment one more time here. I get these comments all the time from people who are, I somehow lost it. Here it is. Come to Jesus, meditation but prayer, not meditation but prayer. Pray, I pray you have dreams and encounters with him so you can let others know the truth. You're deceived with the mindfulness. Well, I did have a dream with Jesus. I had one dream with him, and he told me to say these things to Christians who come to me because he's sending them to me. That's what I believe, because I believe the dreams are significant. And in my belief system, if you have a dream about the master, it's the master. And I would put Jesus in that because he's a part of the divine hierarchy. He's a part of the Saj Marg system. He does work. He's in charge of point 2. There's 13 meditative points, and he's in charge of one of them. And that's the teachings of the system. And you can believe that or not, I don't care. It's not, it's whatever it is. But some of these things are known facts. There was the Council of Nicaea that edited the Bible, and the Bible was edited and translated. And it was like there was all right, let's make Jesus the only Son of God. Let's make it so the only way you get to heaven is Jesus. Like that was talked about. That was a human, there was human decisions that didn't come from a divine place. let's change his birthday and his death day to coincide with pagan holidays. That fucking happened. You can look that up. That happened. Look up the goddess Stora, right? Easter. Like there's all these things. And there's the whole Santa thing and all that stuff. You know, just all of it. Like Santa has nothing to do with Jesus. It's a fucking zero, right? The real Santa Claus was some guy who, you can read about. One time he gave gifts to somebody and was some kind of thing. I don't know. It was like a one-time thing, and the guy was a saint, and I guess he had inherited a lot of money, and he would give people gifts that he would sneak in and give them gifts because he didn't want them rejecting it. People who were impoverished, so it was a nice guy, Saint Nicholas, but it was small time. And he wasn't really, that's not much of a saint, right? It's somebody who does charity. Like, I don't know what his other spiritual qualities was. A generous person. But he wanted to help people, but he didn't want to make them be embarrassed or stuff. So he'd sneak in their house and give them shit, which still is kind of a little bit weird. But but either way, he's not Jesus, and that has nothing to do with Jesus and his birth, right? It's usurped the holiday. And these things are all true, right? Everything that I said happened factually. And there's reasons for it, and people should think about it because your religion's been contaminated. And I did the same thing with my, when Dodgy turned my thing into a religious cult, I was able to confront it and face it, even though it was painful. And it was a big deal. It's not like, I'm suffering because of it. Things aren't as good in my spiritual life as it were before, but I've had to accept it because it just was, and there was nothing I could do about it. But I did something about it. I created a Gratefullness channel also because of a dream. I had been a preceptor, then I was, the permission to be a preceptor was removed. And I was made a preceptor in 1995, and then 2002 or 3, I was removed from being a preceptor. And then I had a dream in charge and made me a preceptor again. And again, so my dreams, I take them seriously. I mean, they're just dreams, but, they're significant to me. And so, that's why I did the gracefulness meditation to do my best to preserve the Sajmark system as best I could. And that's all I could do, right? But, the truth is the truth, and that's what you're going to get here. I might be wrong about the truth, but I'm not going to, manipulate it, right? And so anyways, religions are, if you look at the bad history of Christianity, the Crusades, and the forced indoctrination, and the abuse of children, and brown people, and indoctrinating these people, and all this forcing the religion on people, and all this stuff, the missionaries, all this stuff that's happened, right? Jesus isn't down with that. He didn't instruct people to do that. This whole idea that, my wife and I are watching that Fly Me to the Moon movie. It's I'm going to cover that, I guess, in my next video. I'll talk a little bit about that. But the guy was trying to win over a Christian senator to give them NASA more money. And he said, God gave us dominion over the earth. And that's not true. The whole manifest destiny, that's not true. And so these lies have caused problems. When people make shit up and say that we speak for God, God speaks to you. You listen to God. You don't tell God what to do, right? God isn't interested in your opinion. He allows you to have one. But, you don't go to God and go, hey, God, I think I know more than you. You know who did that? Satan. And so, hey, God, I think if I was God, I'd do a better job than you. That's the arrogance there. And the Christian religion is loaded with it, where there's things, they're making bold claims and things that are untrue about the position of the religion, the position of Jesus, and their, whatever it might be. And it's just there in the pain and suffering, not just Christianity, all these religions. You serve God. God doesn't serve you. You don't pray to God to change his plan. God, please change your plan because I don't like it. That's what most prayers are. Hey, God, life sucks right now. It's your fault. Do something better. Do better, God, right? And so that's the attitude, where the attitude should be, God, help me do better. Help me understand. Help me, evolve to where I can appreciate and be grateful for what you have given to me, right? The good, the bad, the ugly. Anyways, that's just my thoughts. Only spirituality will save this world. It's power motto, definitely important for the apocalypse. And the ascension, everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.